Hello, everyone. It's me, Arden Lee. I am the creator of the Repatterning project and the front woman of Arden and the Wolves. And I am here today to conduct, less of an interview and more really of like a conversation between me and Alexander Moore of practicaloccult.com. .gov.org. Alex and I have been friends we've been in each other's spheres for about a year and a half now. We actually met on the day of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, if you want to know anything about our friendship.
Really? Okay.
we are an amalgamation of Alex's component of not underestimating oneself spiritually, combined with my component of engaged compassion in the world, and together I think we combine our skills for a lot of really cool expansion on the things that we both do. And so Alex, tell people a little bit about yourself, because some of my my followers, my subscribers might not be familiar with you. And even though I've got some people who follow me for Magick, like, talk a little bit more about what you do before we dive in.
All right. Well, you can find me on practicaloccult.com. I'm primarily I'm an educator of occultists. I fill the gap of if you are an intermediate level occultist, I'll help you get to the advanced level. I'll help you get better. I'll help you make your life a wonderfully enchanted place to be, because I recognize that there isn't a lot of that. Also, I sell 101 courses for those who aren't really intermediate yet on the website. I do divination. And I opine about how magic is more miraculous than a lot of people like to say it is.
And I'll
That,
also say, to just, as someone who's taken some of your classes and who's done some trainings with you, my magic, you guys, my magic has taken off more in the last 6 months as a combination of sort of me being ready for more, and also my life sort of getting to a place where I sort of required some more magic. Meeting with Alex's training, and I would say that my magic has expanded more in the last 6 months than it has since the period between 2016 and 2018, when I originally went through my repatterning. So that's that's a pretty big testament.
that is high praise. That is high praise. I always like to hear it.
Yeah. All right. Well, so today we're going to be talking about magic in the sense of magical campaigns. And we wanted to talk about this topic because we see a lot in the community of this sort of binary approach to magic, about magic either works or it doesn't, or it either works or it fails, and you sort of have this one-shot deal at it. And because magic is something that is so personal, because we so often feel that our results are a reflection of our own magical power and abilities, and because frankly, some of the stuff that we do to practice magic can be can make us feel, ostracized or othered from a lot of regular mundane life, in a way that, like, if we're doing it and it's not working, then, like, why are we doing it? Why are we sitting around, chanting and talking to all these herbs and plants and crystals, etc., if it's not doing anything for us? So one of the things that I think Alex and I are especially talented at, each in our own ways, is looking at the big picture and looking at what components where necessarily need to move or need to fit together in order for us to pave the way to creating a future that we are really in love with, to gaining some agency over our magical results. So we want to talk about magic in the sense of, like, magic that is long-term and strategic, magic that is about setting your life up for a big picture, rather than saying, I need money this week, so I'm going to do this spell right now, which sometimes you do, and that's cool. But I think that this conversation is something that a lot of beginner and intermediate occultists don't really give enough consideration to. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, the only other person who talks about it in the discourse is Jason Miller, where he talks about the macro enchantment and the micro enchantments. I always believe that while it was awesome that he did that, and I've often said that that dude was what the occult world needed when he started doing his thing, because no one was saying the things he was saying. I think that because of how much the world has changed in the last 6 years, especially, you need to be more detailed about it. Like this conversation needs to happen more, because you can simply say, excuse me, do one big spell, do a bunch of little spells to facilitate that. And that's simply not enough anymore. Because the way I've always said it to my students is it's never just one spell. It's never going to be the big thing you want is never going to be one spell, because there's too many things in the world now that are getting in the way of you getting what you want. There's social media, there's more competition for everything when it comes to, wealth, health, love, anything you want to get with Magic. You need to be more aggressive about it. But that's also kind of a double-edged sword, because whenever I talk about these things in terms of like things are harder in X, Y, and Z ways, they're also easier in A, B, and C ways. Because while there is more out there, that also means that there's simply more out there that you can enchant. There is a greater number of footholds that you can acquire with your Magic. The thing about that is you got to know what you're doing, and you have to be ballsy enough to do it and go, okay, I want this. This is the goal, and I want to get to my goal from where I am now to here. And there are strategies that can be discussed on how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also, I think we also sometimes underestimate how much getting the thing that we want is going to mean changing internally. And this is for me where repatterning comes in. If repatterning is about changing our internal beliefs, mindsets, habits, structures, the natural sort of go-to responses that get coded into our nervous systems, and changing those so that those responses are in alignment with getting us the results that we want. What that means is that for me, in the beginning, I started casting sigils, and all of this stuff came up for me that required me to make internal changes. So even though back then I wasn't really familiar with the idea of macro enchantment versus micro enchantment, which I really love. And full disclosure, I'm currently taking Jason Miller's Sorcery of Jupiter. It's a great course, and I've had him as a guest lecturer in my advanced container to talk about some of his books. I'm a big fan of his work and the pragmatic approach that he takes. But even prior to then, there was an understanding in me that maybe for me, I was primarily just doing a macro enchantment. I would do a sigil, or or for me, there's so much power wrapped up in my songwriting, my albums, my songs, essentially being hyper sigils that are creating my reality. But I was very aware of the internal changes that were necessary, because I had repatterning as sort of a what is essentially a chaos magic basis, a foundation from which to do my magic. So I would be aware that when a spell was cast, that was sort of the beginning, and that the first thing was likely to happen was that anything that needed to come up in me in order to be acknowledged, made conscious, and either changed or released or altered in some way was going to happen. So at the very least, even though I wasn't really doing these campaigns nearly to the same extent that I have been in the last year, since you and I have become friends and have exchanged more training. Even back then, I kind of knew that the spell was just the start of the journey, and that there was going to be more work I was going to have to do, because you've said this a lot, is that you can call in the thing that you want, but if you are not a match to that thing, you're likely going to lose it.
Yeah, if what you want doesn't want you back, then it's a thing. And that's not just with other people. That's like the job. I mean, shit, most magicians I know have had the experience of summoning a job they just straight up couldn't do. Like I've done that shit. I've summoned to myself things that I could not do. And then, 2 weeks in, you're fucking shit canned from whatever you wanted to do. And you're like, well, shit, my magic worked. The one spell I did. But the thing is, it's the internal changes can reflect other magic that you do. And sometimes the internal change that is the most important, in my opinion, is simply getting out of the way of a magician's pride. Like pride in that sense is what fucks us just every time. Because you're like, oh well, I did the big Goetia thing, right? Or I did this, or I stacked like 100,000 mantras to the spirit in like a night, and I got this amazingly big result, but like everything's still falling apart. And the answer is like, well, yeah, it did the thing. and then it stopped because you got what you wanted. Now there's no magic, right? That's what I try to tell people. I'm like, just because you summoned one thing, and let's say it works, because sometimes it does. Sometimes your one big spell, often if you're good anyway, your one big spell will get you either the thing or close to the thing. The problem is, now that spell's done, it's not just going to keep going necessarily. Like your momentum might keep you going, but let's say you fuck up, or let's say you didn't understand what you were getting into, because that happens a lot too. I think one of the biggest internal things is being humble enough to be like, I don't know a lot of shit. This is why I always tell people, like, do divination, see what's going to happen. Be like, what do I got to know? What do I need to understand about what I'm about to get into? It's like I tell students this all the time. If you get the dream partner, you might have to sit down and ask those hard questions like, all right, what do I got to know? When is the other shoe going to drop? What's it going to look like? What's it going to be? Did I fuck up on my petition? Because you might be like, I want them to be X, Y, and Z and da 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 da. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm a furry though. And you're like, oh man, oh
Are we gonna
man.
shame furries on my YouTube channel?
I don't know. For some people that might work. I don't know. But like the point is, there are things you can be surprised about. And if you are at least humble enough to go, all right, look, I need to know what's going to happen. I need to know what's around the corner. Then you can ask. And if you are not too proud to ask, you might win. You might actually be able to be like, oh shit, this is happening. I need to do this. Another example, right, is industries change. Let's say you really summon yourself into like the best job you could possibly. It's the dream gig. But that industry is slated to change because of the changing world in like 6 months. And you don't know, right? Because maybe you don't. You don't always have a bird's eye view unless you use magic to get your ass a bird's eye view on some shit. And then you're like, oh shit, my industry's changing. I need to know how to pivot so that I can still have my dream life, still have my good shit. And that's where the ongoing campaign comes from. Like, what does that magic look like? Who do you need to bring into your life as like an ally to help you? Again, a lack of pride is being like, I need help. I can't do it by myself, because none of us ever truly do.
Yeah. And another example that I thought of while you were speaking to, because because I love how you and I compliment each other about like some of like some of your examples can bring up like, oh gosh, there were these dire things that I didn't anticipate. But in a way, like my example is where I was just a little bit more naive about what something would take. Is I look at my last Arden and the Wolves EP that came out in 2018 called Who Can You Trust? And my lack of understanding about what it took to make it in the music industry. I just moved out to LA. I had sort of started writing and recording music with I put my band together when I was back in New York, and then I moved out to LA, and it was my music, so I hired all new band members, and I put out this 5-song EP that I was really excited about. I put a lot of work into it, and I had this idea that like, my music is great, it's gonna get out there and everyone is gonna love it, and then I'm gonna like that's gonna be it, then I'll have a career. And I, at the time, I was friends with a ceremonial magician, and the magic absolutely worked. Basically, I was like, can you make it so everyone like loves my album when it comes out? And he was like, sure. I'm gonna summon one of the demons of the Goetia named Fornius. And Fornius, I'm sure you're familiar with Fornius, but for people who don't work with demons that often, and I don't. Fornius to this day is still the only demon that I've worked with. He's someone who basically helps you with like winning over like the good opinions of the public. Like if you're a politician, Fornius is probably a demon that you would really want. So my album comes out and there's amazing reviews, way beyond what my manager at the time, what my publicist at the time had anticipated for it. And the big review where it was, the single was premiered exclusively in an alternative nation. Literally, this review was written like it was the language in it was like if you're here's Arden and the Wolves' new EP. If you're uninitiated, fret not, it will not be long until you fall into the dreamy, hard rocking haven of, all. And then he goes, all of the tracks are absolute burners. I was like, a demon totally wrote this review. Like, some demon definitely, like, who says if you're uninitiated, fret not in a rock review. But I loved it though. But that was like, but I also thought that like I was like, that's it, right? Now I'm gonna be big. And of course it's not, because people forget about like the next month, everyone's on to the next thing and the next album. And I realized that, there were so many things that if I really look, the one good thing about it, well, there were many good things about it, but one thing I was really grateful for was that the response to that album from the indie blogs and the reviewers and the critics, and like literally there were folks there who were really encouraging me to keep going. So it was good in the sense that it actually gave me the courage to be like, okay, I'm going to commit to making myself a music career, but making myself a music career, which again, I haven't released an album since then, because I've been in the studio really like making all the steps that are going to happen. But that wasn't going to happen with like one spell.
Hey, no, sure. That's the thing. I mean, the thing that I always thought was absurd about it was people would look at it and assume that like this is a thing. We talk about this a lot, you and I. Magic is a thing like any other thing. It's the coolest, shiniest thing, in my opinion. It's a supernatural thing, but it's like a craft that you got to practice that exists within the world, right? Like it's still it's a force among all kinds of other forces, but also, and a thing I try to bring up to people is like, if you're new at this, it's okay to be new at this. And by this I mean a campaign. Like we were talking earlier, you learn how to play guitar, you sound good in your bedroom, you're like, fuck yeah. Then you play with other musicians and you sound like absolute dog shit, and you're like, what the hell, I sounded great this morning, what is this shit? And then you learn how to play with other people, which is a component skill that grows off of the first skill. We're like, cool, it's time for the first gig, we're going to be great. And you suck, you're so bad, and you're like, what the fuck, we sounded good this morning, what is this shit? Every time you scale up in scope, the rules change, gravity increases, things become more complicated, the calculus grows, right? So it's just like that. If you've never done this shit before, I think I tell students all the time, give yourself a fucking break. Because there's so many moving parts, you can fail and still recover, because nobody bats 1,000. And that's another problem that I see, and we talked about this as well, in the occult community, where it's either you're summoning a demon to full physical manifestation and you snap your fingers and you have your own private island and $1 billion, or nothing happened, or it's all in your head, or it didn't, or nothing worked. And that's silly. That's absurd. And also, the people who are saying that do not have their own private islands or $1 billion. And if they did, maybe I'd listen to them a little bit, but they don't. And having known magicians who are millionaires, you ask them, like, how'd you do it? And they're like, I don't have time to tell you everything that I did to get here. Magically, not even mundanely, but just magically. I mean, it's spell after spell after spell. The same thing. Like on another podcast, I brought up, do a road opener once a week and you'll see. And I still have people emailing me being like, dude, you weren't kidding. 3 months in, my life is entirely better on every conceivable metric. But that's maintenance.
Bomb.
They are. But that's literally keeping the wheels greased. But I've also told people, if you stop doing it, you'll feel a difference. Things will start to ground to maybe not a halt, depending on how much momentum you have produced in whatever it is you're doing. It isn't like you summon a job and you stop doing a road opener and you're fired. And if that's the case, then you were holding on by a thread this much.
Yeah.
But even to speak to that, sometimes in your campaigns, you will be holding on by a thread, because this is another thing. A thing that Jason Miller said that I agreed with, but I also like to expand on, is make a plan that would work mundanely and then add magic to it. I will be spicy and go, magic can make a plan that would not work absolutely work. It can be the thing that fixes the problem. Doesn't mean you don't have to do shit. But if you're like not the one, and you know you're not the one, and you're like, it ain't gonna be me, magic can make it be you. It will require more work. It'll require, again, the humility to go, I'm not the one, but I want to be. And come hell or high water, I will be. Which, again, doesn't mean you're going to hurt anybody, but it does mean you're going to be like, I need to do this spell on this day and this spell on that day, to add infinitum to keep up what I'm doing. Because again, the only thing that matters is that you win at the end. Winning clean is ideal, of course, but like if you got to do a road opener once a week and someone else doesn't, you still got the thing. So
Yeah.
you should be happy that you have the thing. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, you look at people in the occult community, and these are often people who I feel, due to an unfortunate circumstance of not having good training, because that's the thing, not everybody is lucky. Not everybody had teachers or the right resources at the right time or whatever. And there are people who honestly are sour grapes types who will look back and be annoyed at the fact that other people are doing well because of simply the lottery of tripping over friends, colleagues, teachers, or the right book in the right used bookstore at the right time in their life.
Yeah,
And they'll be
that's
the
that
ones who will be
magician's
like,
pride getting
yeah,
in the way too. It's like
it
that,
is, it is.
that is toxic. That is poison. The minute you get more bitter over other people's results and you allow that to pull your focus from your own, like that is, ooh, avoid that if you can.
I mean,
That's
they
bad.
are some evil eye having motherfuckers, I will say. That's why I think that the increase in the sale of evil eye amulets isn't superstition. I think it's because of those types of people. But
Yeah, I just
and that,
rewatched your protection class last night, so
it is a banger. I'm not gonna lie. But like, but that's the thing. I mean, just because, and that's the thing. Another thing about the magical campaign is you can't let negativity get you down. Like
yeah.
you really can't. You cannot let people's poisonous outlooks, because they're just, again, they're sour grapes motherfuckers who don't want you to do well, who maybe magic hasn't touched them the way it touched you. Maybe it hasn't shown up for them the way it shows up for some of us that are much luckier, due to circumstance or due to the fact that, I don't know, they're more diligent with their fucking training. You
Yeah.
can't let them get in your way, because they will try to get in the back of your brain.
or it's also, just being among mundane people, and the last 6 to 12 months have changed me so much, in that sometimes I realize that people don't have the same language or vocabulary that I have, but being around people who don't understand magic because maybe they don't practice it, and that's fine. Like, no, not everyone needs to practice magic. But something that my co-writer said to me not too long ago, my co-writer for my upcoming album, the Bourbon Room Sessions, who is this super talented, super amazing guitarist who I really, really love writing with. And I've talked with him about, like, weaving magic not only into the album, but also, like, using magic for the success of the album when it happens and things like that. And there's some stuff that I've done. All right, I'm just gonna brag because I don't think this is a secret, but I got him offered a raise in the exact amount that he asked for, and it took me 2 weeks. It took me 2 weeks, and it took me 2 green candles. The funny thing was, he didn't get the raise like at the job that he was at. He actually got the raise, like he got a whole new job, that was like a side gig, but the amount that it offered him was the exact amount that he had asked for, like what he was making at his old job, plus the raise that he
Right.
wanted. And so when that happened, there was a shift in him, and he ended up saying to me a few weeks later, he was like, Arden, you know we live in Los Angeles, and I live in Los Angeles. He's like, I've dated plenty of girls who were witches, you know, but I was like, yeah. He's like, do you ever get annoyed by people like that? And I'm like, well, not really. First of all, I have magic. What am I going to be annoyed about? But second of all, I was that way too. Everyone starts somewhere. If I meet a person like that, I'm probably just going to encourage them, like, be realistic about your results, do your training. If you're going to care more about the aesthetic than your results, then you're gonna get results that are mainly aesthetic. So
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. I don't know. I guess my equivalent of that is when you run across people, and I've actually seen this with students, and genuinely no shade to any student I've ever had to say this to, because my students are strong enough that they can hear things like this. But I've had people come to me and they're like, okay, I'm 40. That's the average age of my students. I'm 40 and I want to be better at magic and blah blah blah. And then you look at them and you're like, you're not good at this.
Mm.
at all. Like, you give them some homework to do, you give them some training, give them some whatever, and their shit, it isn't working. And they're like, oh, but I've been high priestess of such and such, and I did this, and I was part of this assembly of whatever. And you're like, okay, but what did you do during that time? Like, and again, I'm not being a dick, but being like, spell it out for me. What did you do? Or you have people who will say, go into things that are not actionable, in the sense that they'll be like, well, I just need to be in my goddess energy. We talked about that one student I had was like, I need to be in my goddess energy. I'm like, all right, what does that look like? Well, I just need to be in my goddess energy. And I'm like, but explain how you do that. What does the spell look like? And what is it like? Are we doing a glamour to create this sort of thing? Are we integrating with the spirits to create a sort of other kind of result? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And
Also, what goddess? Like, there's a lot of goddesses out there. There's a lot
well,
of
you
ways
know,
to be in goddess
the
energy.
one,
What does it look
the
like?
goddess, the goddess, right? but but no, but I mean, absolutely. And like, questions like that are important to ask. But like, I look at people and I'm like, look, we all do start somewhere, and some of us, and it's kind of funny because we live in a time where better quality of training is accessible literally from your smartphone than there's ever been in general before. Like, there are people out there who sell courses aplenty, and they're good. They're like actually good. But another thing I think is funny, and this is a thing that I've brought up to peers of mine in age and people a little older than me, they'll bitch about like witch talk, right? And I'm not like I'm not on witch talk or whatever, but I will say I've looked at it and like, oh, these kids don't know what they're doing, and I'm like, right, because you knew with all the Llewellyn books that you wasted money on that taught you nothing. Like, you were great, obviously, when you were their age, clearly. Because here's the reality, like, yeah, witch talk is full of stupid shit, just like Llewellyn publishing was full of stupid shit, and there are gems, just like there are on witch talk. The thing is, 5-minute videos, you could scroll through 100 of those motherfuckers in a weekend if you're some like really diligent 15-year-old kid, and come out with the same percentage of gems that you could from reading, I don't know, Enochian Physics Volume 2 for the fourth time in like 1990, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, again, I see this, and it's there's another thing about the campaign thing. Understanding the landscape in which you operate objectively, without your pride, without your ego, and being like, no, there are a good example, right? There are so many things that are new agey that fucking work. And people will be like, oh no, I do real magic. And like, I'm over here, I do grimoires, I do the PGM, I do all sorts of witchcraft stuff, I do tantra stuff that's more and more aggressively serious. Like, I do all kinds of stuff that's like really serious shit that's involved in all this, and I do a lot of training for. And I also do shit that's like new agey seeming as fuck. Like the Silva method. I fucking sing that thing's praises all the time. The Gateway Experience, same thing. Fucking Mentalist Handbook. Clint Marsh, please, for the love of God, put the new edition out. I swear to God, bro. Like, I'm making you so much money. Please, homie, please. All right, but seriously, like, all that stuff, and people are like, I don't know. That seems a little bit, and I'm like, do you want to make more money? Do you want to be successful? Do you want the shit to work, or do you want it to feel good? Do you want it to look good? Because that's another thing. Or worse, you got people who are like, I really want to study this kind of magic. This is like far-flung land. And they're like, cool, so you're like learning the language, right? Well, no. But you've like booked a trip there, right? Well, no. You've like gone on language exchange websites and made friends in that country, right? Well, no. Right, cool. So what are you doing? Well, but this is the only one I really want. I'm like, right, but you could be learning magic here in America or wherever the fuck you live, learning your own regional magic, so that by the time you get to this other place, they're like, wow, you're not a total beginner. I can actually talk to you.
Yeah.
Again, pride in the way. Perfect enemy of the good every time.
Yeah.
Fucking hate
Yeah.
it.
Unconscious self-sabotage, the idea of like, I have to find the perfect teacher, the perfect mentor, they have to have all these qualities, and I already know they don't exist, so I'm just not going to start. And I've known
Right.
people like that. And they will
Mhm.
insist, they will insist on their limitations, which is funny because magic is supposed to be about removing limitations. Magic is supposed to be
It,
about
it it
or
truly
or,
is.
or 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 navigating them, or finding ways around them that we can still get to our aim. And something I think that is also important that I want to touch on. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, and like the idea of sticking with something, the idea of sticking with a practice and not giving up right away. And I think that also this is something that for me repatterning has really driven home, is this idea of when I was in my 20s, you know, and I'm ADHD, as I know you are as well. And I had this sort of idea of kind of like like I was describing with my last album, this idea of I'm going to make a big thing, I'm going to put a lot of energy into a big project, and then that's going to somehow break me. I'm going to have a success, it's going to be a big thing, I'm going to take off, it's going to whatever. And it's not that those instances can never happen, but if you're putting all your energy into this big burst, and then you kind of fade afterwards, which is what I was doing, and then you hop around from project to project or field to field, hoping that one of them will hit. I would say, like, that's not a bad way to spend your 20s, because then at least you're getting a feel for the things that you enjoy and the things that you may be good at. But there is such a deep shift when you actually commit to something and you grow at it, and you don't have that former gifted kid curse of I must immediately be good at the thing or else I'm not. When you really, and I think that is also woven into the idea of a magical campaign, is that you recognize that you're in for the long haul. After I had been repatterning for about maybe 3-4 years, it was about the 4-year mark that I really got this sense of exponentialism, of this idea that I'm doing something, it's bringing me energy, and when I change a pattern in me and I put out a response that therefore gets me more energy back, I focus my energy in places where it will be returned to me, then I'm creating this cycle where I'm making an energetic return on my investment and growing my bandwidth, and therefore becoming, like, at every, you know, plateau along the way, kind of getting a different vantage point, getting a little higher up the mountain. And the growth that can come about when you do that, when you commit to something that really is a path that is going to transform you, when it's something that you're investing in again and again and again and growing in, is so much different from those bursts of energy. And even back then in my 20s, I wasn't necessarily doing magic with any seriousness. This was just the ADHD way I was approaching my projects. But if we think of campaigns like that, if we think of campaigns as a commitment, as a way of saying, where I start now, if I were to do just one big spell, okay, cool, I'm going to do my macro enchantment to maybe kick off the journey, but with the understanding that as I'm growing through the magic that I'm doing and all the steps of the way and all the things that I'm going to learn along the way, the place that I'm going to get when I'm here doing this thing is actually the thing that I'm dreaming about from when I'm here. But I can't see that yet until I actually commit to the process. And, like, believe me, like, nobody was more disappointed than me when I did, you know, put out my very first album, and it wasn't like, oh my God, I'm a famous rock star now, you know, because we dream about that when we put our art into the world. But looking back and seeing the ways that I've grown in making music, and the ways that I've grown in magic, and the ways that I've grown in coaching, when I finally, you know, in repatterning, when I finally committed to the things that I was like, okay, these are the things that I really love and that I'm going to use as, like, the pillars of my life, and I'm going to commit to making a life in them. Those things that you love, by committing to them, they will commit to you. They will commit to you in response, and they will shape you and transform you. And they will, you know, if we think of everything as having a spirit, then those practices we commit to will invest in us in return, just in the same way that a teacher might, in my experience anyway.
No, I agree. I mean, that's extremely, that's cogent. And honestly, I think to add to that, even there's a lot about natural talent that's talked about in magic, just like anything else. There's a lot about luck that's talked about in magic too. Diligence, though, like the grind, you know, every day doing your daily practices, doing your training, doing this, that, and the other. I mean, that itself benefits. But even in everything that I have seen in life, magical or otherwise, it's about planting seeds that will grow. Because what you want, and this is the thing that, like, it's easier when you're not in your 20s anymore to see the forest with the tree, or to see the forest and the trees, and go like, yeah, it's not just about being a rock star or about being this, that, or the other. It's about, like, being that thing forever. It's about being, it's about like, what does that look like when I am at the end of that career? Like, what is it going to look like when I look back and go, fuck yeah, I did it? Not just like, oh no, I'm going to do it, but like, what does it look like when you do magic to like speak to the future self that won and go, how did you do it? How did you win? Tell me what I need to do. And the answers you will get are always more Byzantine and more complicated. And sometimes not disappointing, but humbling in their own way. Because, they're like, oh yeah, well, I failed and this didn't work. And I had to go back to the start even. Because even with magic, because you can enchant yourself into a corner. And I'm not, I've definitely done that my share of times in life because you don't see where you need to go. And sometimes you don't know that the thing you're calling in is going to be what you thought it was. Because there's also a degree of which, or a degree to which, you're like, am I trying to over control things with too many enchantments? Because that's the thing, is it's the tightrope, right? It's the balancing act of like, you want to not be shy about, dumping the magic sauce on it. But, if you have too much sauce, you are surely lost because you can get lost in the sauce. You know what I mean? Like it's a thing, but it's unfortunate that that kind of thing can happen. And it's because I've had students be like, bro, I worked so hard to be so good at this, and now I have to like start over learning a new kind of like, yes, always. You're never, be court the feeling of being a beginner.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Court, yeah, because if you can be a novice anytime you need to, the pain of failure is going to be a lot easier to swallow. Because again, you will fail. Or the thing that like another thing we were talking about the other day is the dip point that I like to call it. The time in your campaign when
That's right.
nothing
The
seems
dip
like it's
point.
fucking working.
Yeah.
You're like, because you're like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, we're doing it. And 6 months of I'm doing the spells, I'm doing the work, I'm moving forward, nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden you shoot up at the end and you look back and you're like, oh wait, my magic was doing shit this whole time. Because and this is another thing too, all the question that comes up, and it's a fair question in magic, is how do you know it was your magic and not coincidence?
Right.
How do you know that your magic really did this? And fair. But at the same time, you can really fall into the category of, well, unless you regenerate a severed limb, I don't believe it was magic. Or unless you can teleport, I don't believe it was magic. And as anyone who really does this will tell you, sometimes to the outside world, it will look like the dumbest coincidence ever. But you, when you're in the driver's seat, you're like, no, I literally don't have the time to explain to you all the reasons why this was not a coincidence.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
like your lexicon of omens has to do with it, your lived experience. Because like there are things about your life, just small mundane details that like that other people don't. Like
Yeah.
a perfect actionable example of this is, let's say you do magic to enhance your career as, I don't know, a professional magician, right? And you're like, okay, I want to grow in my career and I want to do this and I want to do that. And somebody gets you a hookup to go speak at a conference or something. And you're like, oh yeah, well, my magic did that. And someone's like, well, I don't know. You're in the industry and you're kind of funny and you're interesting to talk to and da 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 da. But you're like, no, like I can't tell you that this person also told me that they had a dream that they needed to talk to this person they haven't talked to in 2 years. The day I did the spell, which was a month ago, and then that new friendship took the form of like who can talk at my event, who can be on my podcast, who can do whatever, and then it came to me. Like that's what I mean. That's how it builds. And within a campaign, you need to accept the fact that there are 100 variations of that happening at all times to get you where you need to go. Because even just looking back at the staggering number of coincidences that needed to happen to get you even to the halfway point. If you can look at that and not believe in magic, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I got nothing for you at that point. You are just on a different level of skepticism that honestly I don't envy.
And I'll also say, like, as someone who, I am an autistic survivor of gaslighting, and I am given to over explaining myself. And like the minute that we try to start over explaining, especially with magic, it's just not worth it. Like I basically, if people are like, oh well, that would have happened anyway or whatever, my go-to response has become like, okay, if 80% of what I am casting for, and I haven't kept a spreadsheet like you do or anything, but I generally think that 80% of my magic's efficacy is actually it's a pretty conservative percentage. I would say if I'm like at 80%, probably at least another 15% just hasn't happened yet, right? But ultimately, if what I say to them is like, okay, but I've cast for all these things and I have them, okay, I don't care. I don't care if magic isn't real, because if I have the thing, then clearly whatever I'm doing is working. Like sometimes you look at people and you just look at their lives and you're like, I don't think you're really in a position to be questioning my methods. You know, if I
No,
have it
there's
and I'm
that
happy,
too.
then it's great.
Yeah, but also I would say even on the other side of that, there are certain occultists where you look at their lives and you're like, there's no fucking way this can't be real. Like there's no way you could have all this cool shit just being you. Because again, I've known some people that the only good thing they had going for them was magic. That's it. That's the only thing they fucking had. They were fuck ugly, they were goofy, they were weird to talk to, they were kind of dumb, and their lives are still fucking shimmering. And you're like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Like that's the biggest thing when people will doubt me, because it has to happen in a minute, because obviously this is my job and I surround myself with people and whatnot. But every time I've experienced doubt, to me it seems like the height of absurdity, because my lived experience and the lived experience of everyone I trained under, everyone that I teach, everyone that I look at as peers, it's all kind of do magic get thing, like, and if we can't all be the same crazy and the same lucky, that doesn't, that like again, the math doesn't add up on that one. But of
Yeah.
course, you can tell this to a kind of person who's like, I am smarter than the majority of our species for all of history because I have a Reddit account. Like you can't talk to that motherfucker. Like, so there's no point. There's no point.
Yeah. And also, I want to also go back to what you were saying before about something that I often tell people, and this is in my Myths and Magic course, and every time I teach magic, is that in my experience, the most common thing when we cast for something, the first thing that happens is that it will bring up anything within us that is not in alignment with our intention. And so what this means is that there can actually be things that make it appear like our magic is backfiring. And you saw me have a moment of that earlier this year, where I remember, you were very much a part of this journey that I was taking in terms of witnessing and giving me feedback on what was happening. And I remember like there was a big blow up, and I remember like going to you and like you were like, all right, let's do a divination and let's find out like what happened, what went wrong. And now it's about like maybe 4 months later, looking back at that and being like, oh, wait a minute, no, that was actually something that came up that needed to be cleared and addressed. So what looked like a big blow up, or what looked like something going wrong, looking back now, it was like, oh, I actually didn't understand what was going on. And so I think it's a really good point that you bring up about overcasting, about overly trying to control things, because for me at that point, I definitely was in this place of, should I just let things unfold? Am I trying to control things too hard? And I think, I think ultimately my spirits who were sort of on this campaign with me didn't let me screw things up too much. But I remember having that moment of like, I'm getting overly anxious. I'm not trusting. And I think I need to like loosen my grip a little bit, because I don't want to accidentally cast for like, I don't want to smooth over the thing that is actually meant to happen. I don't want to, if something comes up and it's chaotic and it's not what I expected, it's not what I anticipated, and it looks like a result that is going wrong, I don't want to make a mistake and try to correct a thing that actually needed to happen in order for everything else to need to happen. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense to anyone who doesn't know the situation.
No, no, that does. That was a good way of explaining it. I think to add to that, there's a lot I see in terms of like both things that need to happen for other things to happen, and the idea of like overcasting. This is important. This is why it's important to have spirits that you can trust and good spirit communication, because then you can ask them like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why did you do it like that? because again, these are objective consciousnesses that can talk back to you if you know how to talk to them and if you're diligent with practicing. So you can be like, all right, look, bro, appreciate you and all, but why did you do that? And they'll be like, no, listen, this needs to happen for this to happen. And you can say, I need you to prove that to me. I need you to show me because that's insane, bro. And I'm a little bit weirded out right now. But to that end as well, this actually is something that I just talked to a student about earlier today, is how much of it do you put in your spirit's hands and how much of it do you put in your hands? Whether it's like, putting in the hands of the universe or whatever, however you want to phrase it, whatever you believe is happening, whatever your cosmology or tradition is saying is going on, that's less important. What's more important is like how much of it are you doing and how much of it are you like, no, this is a non-negotiable, because that's where like discernment and personal wisdom come in. Like, and by personal wisdom, I mean knowing yourself good, bad, and indifferent. Like if you're like, look, man, these are non-negotiables about what I want. Like there's a lot that the universe or your spirits or whatever can be like, no, but this is an even cooler thing. But there's also a degree to which it's kind of like, would you let your grandma pick your partner? Like pick your romantic partner? I wouldn't. Like, you know what I mean? So like you got to be like, no, 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 no. Actually, I want this. And I don't care what needs to happen for this to exist, because without this, I don't want it. And this is where I also talk about, really being objective with yourself in terms of especially magical campaigns, because it's often asked of a lot of people or by a lot of people of me and other occultists, if this stuff was really possible, why wouldn't you see more people with amazing results? And my answer is always, you do. You're just not looking in the right place. They do have these amazing results. They do have the dream job, the dream partner, the dream whatever, like whatever that is for them. And again, just because their choice is different than yours, and believe me, as someone who's done like lover drawing magic for people, people want shit that will shock you. And not in a good or a bad way, just in a, oh, okay, shit, man, that's what you want, like kind of way. But it's the same thing where like, because this is a part-time job you're taking on, and I'm talking about like cumulative 100 hours of spellcraft to get to a
At
big goal,
least.
maybe. But when you think about it like that, it's both more doable and also easier to understand. When you're like, okay, 100 hours, that's almost 3 work weeks for a normal person. That's, however much that I would put into a hobby or to build something. Or like there were people who put 100 hours into like crushing a video game to completion. It's a doable thing. So you got to look at it and go, okay, only 100 hours to have this amazing thing. Now, granted, of course, it isn't 100 hours straight. It's over the
Right.
course of, I don't know, 6 months or a year or whatever. But when you look at it like that, you're like, yeah, actually, people do have these amazing results and they do have these things. And sometimes they take forms that are a little different than they originally expected. Maybe they're better. Hopefully, they're better than you hoped. I did have a teacher once upon a time who was always like, add in or better than this to your petitions, right? Like, I want the best job, or better in ways that, like, but then again, you got to be able to trust your spirits, because if you can, this is why spirit communication is important, because otherwise they just watch what you do, what you type on your phone, the shit you watch on the internet, that nasty shit you watch on the internet. I know what you watch, but
You don't
truly,
know what
like,
I watch.
I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the audience. I know what they're watching, but no, but like truly, like they watch what you look at if you can't talk to them, and they extrapolate from there, and they're not perfect.
Yeah.
None of these things, that's the other thing too, like none of these consciousnesses are without flaw, without the ability to get shit wrong. So if they're like, well, I mean, shit, they want this job and this career, but all they look at is stuff like this. Can I find a way to bridge the gap? Or like they say they want to lose weight, but they're not exercising at all, and they're not even making an effort to. And that's my goal. I have to make them lose weight. I guess I'm going to make them sick because I have to get this done, because that's my job. That's what I agreed to do. I got these offerings waiting for me on the other side, and I want them, which is why the age old, like, oh, I asked to lose 20 pounds and I, became bulimic, is a thing that happens in magic to people, because the spirits are like, you are not fucking helping here. You're not even showing me what you want. And if this is why, like, you gotta sometimes talk to them and also be willing for them to talk back and be like, yo, you know how you said you wanted this thing and it's been 2 months and you aren't writing the great American novel, my absolute dude. And you're like, ah, fuck. So like, get ready for that too, because they will be like, bro, we want to help, but if you're not doing anything, so that's the other end too. Like, you got to hustle, and
Yeah.
it's frustrating at times, but you got to, because the more inertia you produce, the better your magic has shit to grab onto.
Mm. Yeah, and you got to open up pipelines too, right? Like
Oh yeah.
you have to be responsible for opening the channels for things to come to you, or else, it's if you're saying like I want a whole bunch of money, and you're not out there, looking for a job, or if you're an entrepreneur, like making offers or whatnot. That was something I was also talking about with some of the Jason Miller work, that idea of make a plan that should work mundanely and then cast for it to
Mhm.
happen. I was just
Yeah,
speaking
yeah.
to one of my colleagues the other day about, money magic, and basically saying like, do you have an offer that you are putting out? Do you have an offer that you can enchant and say, I want X amount of people to buy this offer, and that's how I'm going to get this sum of money that I need? That, like, are you doing the math to it? If you're just expecting, that, because then it's going to come to you through, possibly the worst channel possible. You're going to get something that is undesirable. So you need to, like, your job, I think, as an occultist, is to open these doors for those things to come in, to basically say like, okay, I have set up everything to where I am ready to receive this, and there are multiple pathways for this to come to
Mhm.
me. Now, do your work, and now choose the best and the fastest one, or whatever that looks like.
Right. And I mean, there's also the reality too that like a lot of spells, not all, and it's weird because you can never tell which ones will and which ones won't, but a lot of them stay in holding patterns until they can actualize. And if you like do a bunch of magic to get a bunch of things and you decide like, oh fuck it, I don't really want that, I'm just gonna avoid it, you better deal with the fact that like those opportunities are still gonna happen because you put it out there. And it's kind of like, you see someone who is in a really shitty place in their life, and they do a lot of magic, you know, willy-nilly for a bunch of shit that they want, but they don't really want. And then they get their shit together, right? Like they have like a come to Jesus moment. They're like, oh fuck, I got to get my life together. And they get their life together, and all of a sudden, now that their life's together and they
They
have more
take the
avenues,
repatterning project.
they could take the repatterning project, but then they have all these avenues for shit to happen, and these spirits are like, fucking finally, Jesus. And then they
Yeah.
they do the thing, and they're like, oh, but I don't want these things anymore. I asked for these things when I was a different person. And they're like, yeah, but you still asked for them, my dude. So you gotta be discerning about that too. Like, just
Yeah.
because a thing didn't manifest right away. And that's the thing about like time frame that's weird today. I used to say shit like all the time when I was growing up. Oh, if it doesn't happen in a month, it's not gonna happen. And for a while in my life, that was true. Now I've seen people, good friends of mine, who will be like, I'll do a spell. 6 months down the line, it actually hits, and it hits amazing. And you're like, oh shit. And you look at it and you're like, that really was the spell. What the fuck? Like, why did it take so long? And then you walk it back, right? You follow the dragon's tail back, and you're like, oh no, all these crazy things had to happen for this to happen. But this goes back to the whole like, divination, right? Like, ask what's going on, because that's another thing too. Another thing I teach is like, your spell exists in a finite point in time and space. Where is it? What is it doing right now?
Mm.
Because if you do a divination and it's like it's not moving, you're like, well, why isn't it moving? It's blocked. Well, blocked by what? Blocked by circumstance. You do a road opener, you know what I mean? You do a blockbuster spell on it. You're like, no, fuck it, it's not blocked anymore. Fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
this thing. So, but these are like the nuts and bolts of things that again, your occultists who aren't willing to engage in the campaign do it. But that's the kind of the thing. I mean, you got to have something that you want bad enough that really inspires you to be like, you know what? No, fuck it. I'm not gonna lose. I'm gonna have the cool thing that I want. And if you're willing to be inspired to do it, then you're gonna do the work. You're gonna put in the cumulative 100+ hours to do something really, really remarkable.
Yeah. And I think, we were talking about that dip point the other day too, and how do you get yourself through that point, where, you're tired of it. You're not seeing the results that you want. Why are you doing this? And I always come back, for me, I always come back to the hero's journey, right? And the hero's journey, like, sometimes I like, there's so many legitimate critiques of the hero's journey, and yet at the same time, I feel like the people who are like, oh, well, that's, yeah, Joseph Campbell was a Western white dude who's looking at it through like a very Western white dude kind of lens, and yeah, I get all that stuff. But if you actually read The Hero with a Thousand Faces, like, which I read when I was 18, and you see all of these similarities coming up in these different cultures, you realize, like, oh, wait a minute, even, sure, there's room for other story formats, there's room for, there's room for other voices. It doesn't always have to be this one thing, but this one thing, the cosmogonic cycle, the steps of the hero's journey, is so prevalent, and it is so ingrained in, like, pretty much every fairy tale. Every fairy tale is about, we leave the village and we go into the magical world, and then we have the ordeal, and then we have to get back, and we return to the village, and we have the elixir. Almost every Disney movie, Star Wars, all of these things, these stories, this story cycle is very ingrained in our bodies at this point, because it is ingrained in so many of our cultures. And the thing for me that always, for me, frames a journey of transformation is this understanding that if I am the hero and I'm on a hero's journey, there's gonna be a dip. And in fact, if there's not a dip, I might not even be doing it right. And for me, this is very familiar with the process of making an album, because making an album is a commitment. And Alex has heard my my Twin Flame album, which is completed it, except for the bonus track, basically, even though it's not going to be out for a little while. And so, like, you're familiar with, there's actually a place in the album where I experienced that dip, and it was so necessary to the story, to the transformation itself, that if I had tried to bypass that, I might not have accessed the wisdom I needed, or I might not have progressed in the journey the way that, like, when we're at that place where we're like, oh my God, I've been doing it and I've been doing it, and like, why the fuck am I doing this, right? And for me, really feeling into that, I was at this point in my own journey with this, where I was like, I have sunk thousands and thousands of dollars into this album. I am the only person who cares if it exists. I am running into all kinds of obstacles. Why am I doing this? Is it even worth it? Why do I care so much? Why am I literally making a $30,000 album about this intention? Because I believe in the signs that have been telling me that the twin flame path is real, which also makes me look like I'm freaking insane, or especially did at that point. Now that I'm like, now that I've done more of it, people take me a little more seriously about that. But it turned out that was the thing, that was the song that I needed to write, was the why the fuck am I doing this song? And I wrote Waiting on the Sun. And that is the thing that broke me into the next step, the next song. So I always encourage people to, when you're at that point, can you zoom out? Can you view yourself as the Luke Skywalker in your own story? And can you see yourself as the hero who is on the journey, who is hitting that point, and that maybe that is the thing, and the next thing that you need is actually through that dip, is actually an admission of why am I doing this, or this is such hard work, or there has to be another way, or whatever that ends up looking like. So that's what I would encourage people to do, is frame it in that larger storytelling journey of transformation frame, and you will see yourself more objectively as you're going through those points, and you'll be able to be on your own side and root for yourself more, because you'll be seeing yourself from that bird's eye view, and you'll be like we watch a movie and we're like, no, you're almost there. Like, you're the hero, you're the Skywalker. Like, we know you're gonna make it by the end of the movie. Can we have that same belief in ourselves?
I mean, I think that's crucial. I think it's also crucial because you're doing all of this shit, right? You're doing all this magic, all this work, all this effort, and pushing through the hard parts of it. And there may be more than one dip point. There may be more than one situation where, like, you have to backtrack, or things go wrong, or you miscalculated. and did magic for something that actually made things worse. Like that happens too, and forgiving yourself for your own mistakes is a big deal, but also just reminding yourself of how good it will be when you have what you want. Because that thing that you want exists. I say this all the time. The thing you want exists. Someone's going to get it. It might as well be you. But the thing I ask people when they're in that thing is, why shouldn't it be you? Like, give me a good fucking reason why it shouldn't be you. Who's going to get it? Who's going to get it when you don't get it? That's another thing I've said to inspire people. I'm like, all right, picture the person you hate the most having the thing you want. Oh, that'll push you through. That'll make you be like, nope, nope, no. And now out of spite, I will do this thing. I will win because I can't allow myself to fail. But that's kind of a thing. I mean, you got to want it bad enough because, like I say, it really does work. It is this real thing. And when you finally achieve it, then of course the work begins where you have to maintain it. But that's another thing about the return to the village. Your return changed. The first time you go, it's kind of like the first time you see Magick do something that could only be Magick, you're changed. The first time you see Magick do something horrible, whether yours or someone else's, you're changed. The first time you see Magick heal someone, you're changed. And all of these component experiences within being an occultist keep adding to you and changing you and showing you to yourself. One of the weirdest things is it's never just one campaign either. Like it's a fractal, right? It's never just one spell. Well, actually, it's never just one campaign. Actually, it's never just one lifetime. Actually, it's never just one whatever. Like it continues to expand outward infinitely. So when you're on your fourth or fifth magical campaign in life, it's a lot easier to look at these like dip points and be like, okay, I've been here before. But if you never have, and most people hearing this haven't yet, you got to look at it like, and for me, it was always helpful to be like, this never ends. This never stops. I must be prolific in my magic. I must be prolific in my miracle making. If you look at it like that, then for me anyway, and for a lot of people I talk to, it's given me an unlimited amount of stamina to get where I want to go. And plus, winning at the end of the day, it regenerates you. It proves to you like your magic really is that real. You were right all along. You got the great thing. You fucking won. You get to have that actual main character moment without the main character delusion. Be like, no, fuck you. I did it. I got to win. And then again, of course, you have to maintain what you have and deal with imposter syndrome that comes after that, and all that really lovely shit that is the next thing. Because again, it never ends.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, you gotta, because it's like, it's like that meme where like, the somewhat wholesome meme where the two people are digging and the person gives up right before they hit the gold and the other person continues to dig. Be the person who continues to dig. Like, obviously work smart as well as working hard, but like, if all signs point to, and this is also why like sometimes going and getting a reading from somebody else and being like, is it fucking working? And if they're like, yeah, it's fucking working, just fucking keep doing it. Sometimes it's good to surrender to the process of just keep doing it. Keep lifting the weights, keep practicing scales, keep meditating, keep doing inner fire, keep doing whatever it is you do, but keep doing it. The Stephen King thing. How do you write one word at a time?
Yeah.
Like, how do you do how do you have these campaigns one spell at a time?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that idea that yeah, it is who we become, and it is that beginners, that the fool kind of setting out at the beginning of the journey mindset that I think really separates those. We talk about magical pride, or we talk about ego or whatever, and I'll just say that as someone who's been doing magic for about 10 years now, I've seen people around me who they get some, they get some taste of success or whatever, and then they begin to sort of talk down to people around them, or they begin to think like, oh, well, I'm here and I'm this and that. And then years go by and the person who was humble, the person who was eager to learn, the person who did not rest on their laurels has achieved and accomplished so much more than that other person who thought that they knew everything. So the more that we lean into I think another thing too is that something that works nicely for me is getting curious about, if I do this and I do this consistently, who will I become? Like who do I have, and can my curiosity fuel me through any resistance that I have, to stick with this, because who will I become if I do a curricula practice literally every single morning, which is my sort of New Year's resolution, my not 100,000, but 20,000 mantras in one night on New Year's
That
Eve.
was pretty based, I'm not gonna lie.
Took me 6.5 hours. Oh my God, I was miserable. I was like, I don't ever want to do that again. But I'm sure I will at some point. But yeah, it's that curiosity, I think, is the thing that keeps us going, that what will happen if I keep doing this? Who will I become? Who will I transform into? And I think that's where the rubber really hits the road. I'm curious, what, as someone who specifically teaches um magic in a strategic fashion, what would you tell people? What would your like, if someone's like, let's say someone is beginner, maybe just crossing into intermediate, just about to cross into intermediate, and maybe they're like I was a couple years ago, and they're like, I see really cool results, I know magic is real, and I cast a spell, and some stuff happens or whatever, but they've never really waged a campaign. What would you say to them about, like, what would they need to know to start a campaign? How do you design a campaign?
Well, so you start off with wanting something big enough. Like that's the thing. It has to be big. And again, it can't be just one spell. But it also has to be something that, in my personal opinion, the world doesn't want you to have. Now, this is an Alex thing rather than like a universal thing, but like if you look at it and you're like, it's the kind of thing that when you talk about wanting, people roll their eyes, or people will think that you're arrogant for wanting, right? That kind of big dream. Because I mean that's what's going to necessitate it. And again, it doesn't need to be like universally good. I have known people, I'm not going into detail, who have done really, really, really twisted shit with magical campaigns. Like they wanted something twisted that badly that they were willing to go that far to do. And that yearning, that like real urge. But I would ask people, are you willing to do 6 hours of curricula mantras to do it? Are you willing to fast for 3 days, conjure for 4 hours, and see a spirit? Are you willing to break into a graveyard at 3 in the morning and do a spell? Are you willing to Robert Johnson your ass to the crossroads and see what happens? Like, are you going to do it? And if you want it bad enough, then cool, that's how you start. That's the first step. The second step is, even before you cast spell one, be honest about why you want it. And again, the good and the bad. You can be like, oh, I want money because I want to help people, and I want money because I want to be able to, fund nonprofits and shit. And I'm like, okay, cool. What else? Oh, what else? Okay, what else? I want nice shit, Alex. I want a nice fucking house, Alex. I want to feel better than other people, Alex. Okay, cool. Then you have both hands now. You can be both. Because I am not, and I've never been, and I will never be the kind of occultist who thinks you need to be a fucking saint. Some of the most powerful occultists I know are the shittiest people I have ever met. Full stop. Straight up. And that should show you something. Not that you have to be a dickhead to get results, but that like you don't need to be perfect to have miracles. You don't need to be a fucking bodhisattva to hold fire in your hands. You can be kind of a piece of shit. So if you're not a piece of shit, then you're like above that already. And then
I
when it
will
comes to
I will I will add that, because I don't entirely disagree with you in that. I've certainly met, there are certainly powerful magicians out there who, have not worked on their own ethics or whatever. But I will say, from my personal experience, I always, it's like that idea of the bodhicitta, right? That if we do something with the for the benefit of all beings, with that intention, that adds a power to it. And our friend Joelle talks about this in terms of that magic is powered by childlike wonder, and that having that sense of childlike wonder to our magic and that openness creates, in my experience anyway, more alliances with spirits who are, who want good in the world, and who want good, good things, and who see us as a force of that. I think in many ways that's been that's certainly, I think, you know, Joelle's superpower. And I think my
Sure.
superpower has been my my deep love of alignment, you know. But it's funny because we're talking about the same thing, but we're using different language in some senses. Whereas you say, you know, that thing that the world doesn't want you to have, and it's this antagonistic thing. And certainly I've experienced that. But when I think about that, I think about the dream that is so important to you in your heart that when you speak about it, it almost feels like your confirmation bias selects for the people who disbelieve in you, because you you know, feel like it's so big and that it's so important to you that it's almost like it's where, you know, like if we're not attached to something, it's just like, oh, well, and then we see people get this other thing because they don't care about it as much, because they're just like, oh, well, this kind of fell into my lap. And for us, we're like, oh my God, that's such a big thing. And to really use magic to understand our worthiness of it and to remove those blockages that says, you know, no, this is, you know, you're not worthy of it because it's so important to you, or it's so important that you think you're not worthy of it, or whatever. And remembering that, like, no, actually, when we feel that way, or when it seems that way to us, that might actually be a sign that it's the thing that we're meant for, because, like, precisely because it feels that high stakes and that important, that we're so afraid of rejection around it that we tend to see people saying like, oh yeah, you're gonna be a famous singer or whatever. Okay. Oh yeah, I met, like, oh yeah, that girl, like she thinks I'm gonna produce her, whatever. Like I faced a ton of that in my time. And that in many ways, like, was able, when I was early, you know, much younger, to override all the people who believed in me, because the rejection around it was so hurtful. So I think we're talking about the same thing.
No, I agree. The reason why I use the language that I use, though, and I want this clear to anyone listening, it isn't me saying from like a low common denominator, as in like you can be a piece of shit, you should be an awful person, you should be whatever. It's to show you that you don't need to be perfect. Because oftentimes when people roll up, I have people who I teach who are like, I don't have a shining utopian dream for the big thing I want. I just fucking want it. And again, that's cool too. Like it's a spectrum, right? Just because I know people on this side who are like unironically evil, and I know people on this side who are kind of like living saints, both exist and everything in between. These two extremes do not serve as the arbiter of power or success, is what I try to get at. When I talk about things people think you shouldn't have, it's about the level of complexity. It's about, why is their knee jerk that? Is it because they're just jealous people, or because they may be your well-intentioned relative who's like, you should probably get a job in the event that your music career fails or whatever? Because they can look at it and go, practically, mechanically, so many things would need to happen in a row to do this that it would be unlikely. But that leads me to my next point. Research how people have done it, the thing you want. Research how people specifically like you have done it. And if there exists even one example of someone who has done it, who is like you, because again, we don't all have the perfect recipe within our DNA to achieve the thing. You know, you want to be a basketball player and you're 5'6". Has it existed? Yes, it has. So you go, okay, how the fuck did they do it? What about them made them be able to do it? And this is, again, mundanely speaking, work on the thing. You know, I have clients, and I love you guys to death, dudes who are like, I'm 5'7", bro, it's over. It's over, bro. And I'm like, all right, walk down a major metropolitan area on a Saturday when the weather is warm and see all the 5'7" dudes who have girlfriends. Calm the fuck down, bro. Like things like that, like literally the mechanical homework that leads you to, again, even before spell one is cast, prove to yourself that it can in theory be done, no matter how hard it is. Because if it's never been done before, then your path is different. Not unaccept or not unattainable, but truly different. But if it has been done, you can use that as a metaphysical relic, just like pictures of places or people can attach our spells to them. Stories and folklore, because that's what it is. Folklore of like underdog stories are magical links to success. You can anchor your magic to the story of this fucker that did it and be like, open my roads to shit like that. Because you also don't know the whole story, so you do divination. You're like, all right, so-and-so who did the thing I want, so-and-so who has the same problems or flaws that I have. How did they do it? And your cards are like, well, the story is true, but also there was this, or also there was that, or also there were these other things. And here was their dip point, and here was their thing. Because again, especially if it's like a person who's dead, you're not really invading anyone's privacy to be like, spirits, what was their dark night of the soul like? Show me. Give me a dream. Let me experience it. Let me prepare for this. Because if I can go through what they went through without magic, with magic, I can do it. And then it just comes to writing a list, like what are the things that happened in the order that they happened, and then enchanting for the equivalent of that one by one by one in your own life. And crucially, making the right mundane decisions to capitalize on it. Don't make mistakes. Even without going into detail, Arden has enchanted for always knowing what to say in certain situations. Brilliant, brilliant thing. Because let's say you're in a situation you've never encountered before, and you're like, oh fuck, 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 it's happening. But you've enchanted to know what to say. Then even if you're terrified, you're like, well, actually, blah 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 blah, and then you fucking did it, and you're like, God, I'm a legend. You know what I mean? Like you gotta have those moments where you pat yourself on the back, like I'm so fucking cool. But
Sometimes I've even
yeah,
enchanted for the other person to have the right thing to say, and not even that they're going to say the thing that I wanted them to say,
yeah,
not like to compel them, but like I've
right.
thought about like, oh, I've got a difficult conversation to come up that's coming up. I need to
Mhm.
have the right words to communicate and create, and
Right.
create simpatico. And then like after a couple of those, I was like, all right, it worked. I was like, well, why am I not giving that to the other person too? Like it just seems
No,
unfair.
no,
I was
this
like,
is
oh, you know
yeah.
what? They have all the right words to say that they need to communicate to me, and it makes a difference if you
No,
were
this is fair. Yeah. In addition to that, though, two other things that I tell people. One is enchant for good luck, like crazy good luck. Like do every spell you can find for being lucky as fuck. Because then, because again, like lucky breaks, right? Right place at right time, enchant for that. But also, and this is the thing that's interesting. I know an Islamic occultist, a jinn magician, who he was telling me that like there's this thing this like prayer that is often said in traditional in like regular Islam where it's like, and let Allah make this easy for me,
Mm.
or thankfully Allah made this easy for me. And he's like, I use that as an enchantment for shit because like I want things to be easy for me. Like fuck it, I don't want to work hard if I don't have to. And again, in keeping with my always make the big asks, a really healthy big ask is like, I don't want to work that hard, bro. Like, do I have to? If the answer is you have to in certain areas, then yeah, nose to the grindstone, fucking do it. But if you don't have to, don't waste your effort because you only have a finite amount of stamina. No matter how much magic you use to boost it, your physical and mental stamina will run out eventually. But if you can expand that to be like, make shit easy for me, right place, right time, good luck, everything. I mean, meta enchantment on your other enchantments. Road openers every fucking week. Everyone should be doing that every fucking week. I promise you your life will be amazing if you fucking do it. But like, protection magic against like I teach people in my training, curse the spirits of failure, curse the spirits of disease. Like beat the fuck out of them so they're scared to be near you. They're like, oh fuck this, I don't want to fuck with Arden. Like she beat the bricks off of me. Like, no, I'm gonna go
I'm
fuck with
still
someone
scared to
else.
do that. I would rather us just have a nice detente.
Nah, fuck that. I'm gonna beat the bricks off of them. But then again, that's just me, Mr. Vegas. But like, I mean, but now if you're super spicy, and you have competition, you can be like, go fuck with them and not me. Like, you know what I mean? Because that's another thing. You will eventually reach a conflict in your campaign. You will have someone trying to get the thing you want. This is where individual personalities and ethical boundaries are important. You got to know who the fuck you are. And you got to know who you are before you reach that point, ideally, because you don't want to have a knee jerk reaction like, oh no, you're not taking what's mine, and then do something you'll regret.
Yeah, that's
When
very true.
you could gently steer your competition away. You could do the double win where you're like, no, they get the best thing for them and I get the best thing for me. But you got to ask yourself, are you able to split your resources like that? If yes, cool. That's another thing. During a dip point, this thing I just thought about right now. During a dip point, do a divination to see if you have any competition that's fucking with you. And if you're in a position where you're like, I can't do any more spells, I'm spinning my wheels, gently drift them away. If you want something to do, that'll fill your hours up. Be like, no, 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 no. My competition, I'm gonna make them my allies. And then at the end, you're gonna have that like fucking 80s action movie thing where your rivals like looking at you and you're winning and they're starting to smirk and they're starting to fucking nod their heads. They're like, yeah, you fucking did it. Like you want that shit. You want that victory. Because then you like double win. And if you double win, then you can then, expand it into like triple winning and some shit. I don't even know what that would look like. I'm gonna find out though. It's my next campaign. What it looks like triple win. But no, like things like that, like that's what you have to do. And chart it out, write it down, do a bullet point, do a timeline. Actually, that's a really good thing. Do a timeline and then make that a petition. Like
Ooh,
give that to a Mercury spirit and be like, this is like start date, end date. This is my macro enchantment. Frame that shit on a wall over like your success altar or whatever. There are some people I know who have like collapsible altars for a given campaign, right? They'll have like one guy I know uses like a chessboard and he's named each of the pieces as parts of what he's doing because he's a weird chess nerd. And he's named the opposing side like obstacles in his way, and he'll move them stupid and then defeat them. Like each and every day doing spells. That's like the sympathetic magic diorama that he's using. And like things
that's
like that. I mean,
incredible.
it's so cool. He's fucking based as hell. But like, like really get in. I mean, get in on that shit. Like, but also like never forget, kids, don't forget to have fun because this shit is cool. Like, if you don't feel cool when you're doing this, do more magic. Like, be cooler. Be like, I am doing the coolest thing that ever was. And I'm doing this because I mean, even then, like as someone who also does client work, like I've been paid to do campaigns for clients, which also gives you a really interesting bird's eye view on like, I don't give a shit really if this works. Like obviously they're paying me, so I'm going to work. I'm going to do my best. But like you look at it dispassionately and you're like, oh, this is what this looks like from a bird's eye view. It's why whenever I teach students, I give them example scenarios. One example that I always give is if you were put in prison, how would you use magic to liberate yourself? Write it down, figure it out, give me the campaign that would work, and then we will workshop it. And if you get in the habit of scenario running in your head, when life throws a curveball at you, you're going to be trained to think laterally and be like, oh no, this is like that thing I thought about that one time. I know more or less what to do.
Yeah.
And then you will,
Or
in
what
fact,
would I
do
do if
the
I were in so and so's shoes? What would I do?
yeah.
And then of course, like you become that person who has solutions for, all your friends or whatever. And either they either they come to you for a lot or they don't want to hear it because they're invested in being mired in their own problems. Then you have to figure out
Or
who
you become a
your
professional
friends
wizard,
really
you
are.
know? Yeah, that's also true. Or you become a professional occultist because that's just what you ended up doing. You realize you could sell the service. But that's the
Exactly.
thing. When you're going into this shit, and that's the beauty of it, right? Like, because part of it is proving yourself wrong. Because there is that little voice in the back of your head, no matter who you are, unless you are truly delusional, where you're like, oh shit, man, this might not work. Like, maybe I can't do it. Maybe I don't have it like that. When you do prove that you do have it like that, it's a level up on to a degree that like you can't imagine until it hits. Because it's
Yeah.
a
You
thing I
can't go
tell
back to your old self.
no, but it's like a thing that like, when I celebrate my wins with my students, I have like been on Zoom calls with them and they're like, I didn't know it could be this good. I didn't know I could be happy like this. I didn't know I could feel because again, you become a being of hyper agency when you achieve that kind of shit. You become able to go, shit, I really can have any fucking thing I want. Now, of course, again, that's a challenge in itself, and that's a lesson in itself, and blur to blur, right? Like, I'm not the guy who like opines publicly a lot about the like this is a lesson you were supposed to learn because as you know, I don't believe in fate. I don't believe in destiny. I believe in magic. And I believe in math, but I also believe in my ability to cheat on the math test. So like, I don't know. For me, this is the ultimate example of that. It's the ultimate example of cheating on the fucking math test. It's like maybe I wasn't even supposed to really have this. Because there are times when you'll win big and you'll look at it and be like, I feel like I slipped in the side door and I stole the eyes of God. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot in like American, like deep American conjure about like stealing the eyes of God to win or to like sneak around or to see ends that you're not supposed to have. I've even heard divination referred to as, borrowing the eyes of God when no
Mm.
one was looking. And like, that's one of the reasons why I love the concept of like cunning and tricking your way to winning. Because for me, again, as a creature who does his best to like lack that sort of ineffective pride, it's just fun. It makes you feel like you got away with it. And for me personally, maybe not for others listening, that's one of the best feelings in the world. When you feel like you just fucking got away with it.
Well, I'll offer a counterpoint, and I think it's interesting because I think again we're talking about the same thing, but perhaps looking at it from a different angle. And I think there is something, I'm not advocating for you know any kind of nobility and suffering that is not necessary, right? I would rather everything be easy and everyone be happy. But I will say that there, for me, especially when it comes to things like competition or it comes to other people, there's folks out there who I see taking shortcuts, and not even like, oh, this is a really smart trickster shortcut that's I'm going to do this and this is going to do that, but rather like um riding others' coattails, or not putting in, not really like getting to a place without them actually doing the quality work, and getting to a place where they're riding on, I don't know, almost like buying fake social media followers. Like that's just an example, or
Oh yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Like, doing the thing and it's really not sustainable. And what I love about the clean win, and I know I know you do too, for as much as you may also advocate for goblin strategies, the clean win is something that is the reason it's so good is that it's sustainable, because it is actually the thing that transforms you. And I know, like, there are folks in the music industry that I have seen who have like capitalized on other people's success, or taking credit for a lot of their work, and use that to get to other places, because folks in the music industry sometimes just aren't looking that closely at like who's writing the songs, or who's actually doing the majority of the work in the band or whatever. And that may get them somewhere, that may get them to something, but then all that stuff that they wrote, like, they don't have that anymore, because they haven't been the one who is learning to put in the work and learning to actually create something that can stand on its own. And so I'll see that, and there's part of me that even in terms of dealing with my competition, it's not even an altruism. I'm not even going to front and say like, oh, I don't, do magic on other people. I don't, right? Because again, I really do think that my ethics are part of what inspires a lot of spirits in particular to work with me, because they know that I can be trusted, to not to not create chaos or havoc or whatever that is not in alignment with folks' highest good. But when you do get to that point, it's like you have created that thing, and now you are that thing, and you look at the work of other people who have cheated or taken shortcuts there, who maybe capitalized on the fact that, especially in Los Angeles, people can be like, ooh, bright new shiny thing, or we'll put money behind this, or we'll put whatever, and you can do that, but it's not going to last. And for me, it's not even about altruism. It is so much more satisfying, when to get to a place of winning and look at someone else who did not do the same things you did, or did not put in the hard work that you did, and to beat them fair and square. To
I
look at
mean,
them
I
and
can
be
see
like, I
that.
did not put you in the freezer. I did not. You messed up your life all by yourself.
No, sure, sure. And I can see what you're saying. To that, though, my counterpoint is I think, again, both hands, right? I think you should have both. Because for me, and this is a me thing, what matters is winning. The clean win is obviously ideal if you can have it. But again, off-white is still white. I'm not saying be a complete piece of shit, but I am saying if you found a way to go on a different path that other people didn't know, to get to the goal faster, that isn't cheating. That's you being cunning. Just like Odysseus didn't cheat, he was smart. You know what I mean? Sometimes you're going to have to not lie, but trick your way around things. That's why in a lot of folk magic, especially in America, spells were referred to as tricks a lot.
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes it is the game you play with the forces in the world. Because sometimes those same spirits some spirits will look at the person and be like, wow, this person's integrity is rock solid. I respect them. Some spirits will look at a person and be like, their cunning is extremely protean and I respect them. So whichever one you can have, in my opinion, and this is kind of one of those like, because I'm famous for ripping the band-aid off, right? Of every occult topic, I will tell you the uncomfortable truth. You can often have the clean win if you are diligent, if you are authentic, if you're up there. However, there are times when you are this close to the fucking finish line and you have a choice. And that choice is, do I do one thing a little bit sneaky and still win, or do I fucking lose?
Mm.
And I'm just here to give people the permission, like, if it's one fucking off-white thing, you got Alex's full permission to do it. I don't care because I would. But again, that's if you have to. Don't be afraid to fight to win. Because sometimes you will have to fight to win. Doesn't mean you have to like do something horrible. But again, you know, competition is competition. If again, if you're running a race and your opponent is right there next to you and he's shoving you, you can trip him if he started to shove you. Like, because sometimes the dirty tricks we pull are in response to, oh fuck, they have an advantage I didn't realize. Or oh fuck, at the very last, like the fucking 11th hour, there's a thing that I didn't know. And I am this fucking close. And
Mm.
I have to win because I did all this work, all these hours. And because I didn't know, because maybe I didn't ask the right questions, maybe things changed, the world changed. And I have to know. You know, for example, I knew more than a few occultists during COVID who used some dirty tricks to keep their businesses open.
Mm.
Even dirtier tricks than they'd ever done before, but it was like, I need to feed my family. I need to keep the lights on. Sometimes the world will come crashing down around your dream. And again, if you can have the clean win and you could do it sparkling in front of everybody, shiny and chrome, love that for you. That's what we all want. But you need to be, you know, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. You need to be able to fight. And again, you probably won't have to. I'm saying, like, just having seen so many people over the course of my life do this, if you do it right, you won't have to 9 times out of 10. But it's that 10th time where you might be pushed against the wall, and don't think that it's worth throwing it away just because you need to elbow someone in the ribs.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, I mean, well, everyone already has Alex's permission for it. They don't need mine.
So it's
I
true,
do
but like I
think
said, you don't know until you go, right? You don't know until you're there.
yeah. I don't know though. I will say though that front look for in my experience anyway, front loading my magic and building the foundation and really doing things in a sustainable way for me anyway has meant that there are so many spirits who are invested in my campaigns by that time that it's almost like they won't
Sure.
let me fail. And I think in the last couple months, I've actually really seen the extent
Mhm.
of that in ways that even I
Oh,
wasn't
you
aware
definitely have.
of.
I mean, should I've seen that? I've seen that even just like doing readings for you. But like, but at the same time too, I think that also brings up the thing that like not everyone has those spirit connections right away.
That's
Like some some people have stronger spirits that give a shit about them from the rip, right? Some people have to work on gaining those. And again, some people, and it also depends on what you want too. Like that's another thing as well. Like if you want to stand in the public eye as a proof of concept, like in the case of your music, as a true multi-layered proof of concept, you need to be clean. You cannot have an even off-white win. But again, if you want to be, I don't know, partner at a law firm, there is no clean win there. And it doesn't mean that lawyers are bad people, but it means that like your industry is complicated in a different way. Not
mm,
that the music industry isn't cutthroat as fuck as well, but again, like what are you doing? What is your goal? What is your win? And then I think another thing that people need to, and this is a less than pleasant reality, but sometimes when you really don't have it like that, and this is where like I often have to look at the people who are out of touch with the world, and a lot of occult teachers are, who will tell you to employ strategies that barely worked 40 years ago, let alone now.
mm. Yeah, that's
And
fair.
they'll tell you like, oh, this is how you have to do it. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but there are times where despite your very best efforts, you may, and this is why I talked to you before, like the magic that pushes you from you just couldn't do it to you did it. Sometimes that takes the form of something sneaky, not something evil necessarily, although people do, and I'm not saying that that's good, but I am saying for the sake of honesty, there are people out there who do. But sometimes, a simple confusion spell so that your competition don't see you sneak ahead. Sometimes that is the thing that differentiates you from success and failure. You see this a lot in, say, academia or like
Mhm.
corporate America, where there are occultists in there trying to get better. And like again, if the landscape is cutthroat as fuck, you may have to you may have to operate within that same landscape depending on what it is you do.
That's true. You want to
Yeah,
know the rules of the field so that you
yeah,
can
yeah,
learn
yeah. I
how
mean,
to navigate
you want
that.
to know the rules and also just how much the landscape likes you.
Yeah.
Because like that's the thing, you can succeed in ways where it's like you are the least likely person to fucking win. There was nothing about you that looked like you were gonna win this hard. And sometimes this is why I tell people to have the good and the bad of why they want it. Because sometimes the good isn't enough. Because sometimes you will be like, man, you know, they could be with someone that's better than me. They really could. Or, yeah, I'm not the best for this job or whatever, but I fucking want it. And I want it for me, God damn it. And then you'll go do it. So again, and this is why conversations like this are important. It gives the listener a three-dimensional view of different perspectives on a situation so they can make their own informed decision. They can be
I agree.
like, this is who I am moving forward with this thing. Because like I'm a certain way, you're a certain way. Each of my students is a different way. There's no one size fits all in Magic and no one size fits all in victory.
I just think it's really
So
funny that like when we have a conversation that like we and you and I have talked about this and how much
yeah,
we
yeah.
appreciate the angles that each other differs around. But I just think it's funny that like we make a talk on my YouTube and like we're so opposed that you're like you have to come on and say I'm not saying you should be a piece of shit. I just think it's funny.
No, no, but because that's the thing too. A lot of people will take one comment and run with it, right? One way or the other, right? Like for example, I've seen in private and in public in Magic certain buzzwords like integrity
Mhm.
be used instead of meaning be who the fuck you are to mean be who I want you to be.
That's a big one, yeah.
And I have seen that. Like for example, there's an author called Mitch Horowitz. Love that guy. That dude lives his life. He wrote this fucking book called Miracle Habits, which I recently reread. Again, everything he says in there isn't for me, but that is a fucking manual on how to be awesome as a person. But that dude is exactly who he wants to be 100% of the time. And that's a level of integrity. But also, he even says, like the final chapter of the book is called Rule in Hell because it's about like you're not everyone's cup of tea, but it's better to rule in your own world, to be you in your own world than to submit to the will of others in that way. I 1000% love the shit out of that. But that's what I mean. People will hear me say, "Oh yeah, some of the worst magicians in the world, or the best magicians I've ever met, were some of the worst people." And be like, "Oh cool, I can be the absolute." No, that isn't what I said. I just said that like the idea that you have to be this desireless floating saint on top of a mountain who's never eaten meat or an energy drink in your life doesn't you don't have to be like that to be good at this. I often bring up because like for a while there was a conversation of like it was on Facebook years ago. It was like, can you be fat and good at Magic? Because fat people don't have discipline was the argument. And I'm over here thinking like I have known some genuinely overweight people who could like bilocate. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's like, nah, it's got nothing to do with it. But then you're like, well, why are you so invested in this aspect of this has to be a thing? Is it because, and you would always look at these people and they were always people who like had lost a lot of weight. Or it's kind of like the most like the person who's a former smoker is the most zealous person about like talking to other people. And you
Right.
gotta you gotta look at that people around you. And this also helps with campaign building because everyone in Magick has opinions, right? And if you talk to people in private enough, everyone hates every other motherfucker, right? Like that's why I try to be so real about this shit, because you see these people get on podcasts and they're like, oh, I really like so and so's work and so's amazing. You talk to them like, I fucking hate so and so. I hope they die in a fire. Like, and you're like, what the fuck? You were just, and they're like, well, I got to be polite in the fucking world or whatever. And you're like, bro, what the hell? Or you talk to other occultists who will be like, yeah, I don't believe that so and so's magic is good. And you're like, okay, but why? Like their life is clearly really good. No, I just don't believe it. Why not? I don't like them. And you're like, you don't need to like them for them to be good at stuff. There are plenty of people I don't like who are good at all kinds of shit. Like hell, I've even had teachers that I didn't like as people, but I wasn't, again, the pride thing, right? Getting in the way of it. But like, so to that end, like you're gonna see when you're really getting in the weeds of doing your magic and building the life you want, you're gonna see people have all these fucking opinions about what magic is capable of, what you should focus it on. Oh, don't reach too high because you can't rely on miracles. Well, here's another Alex permission. Reach as high as you fucking want, provided your base is solid, provided you have made wise decisions. Reach as high as you fucking dare, because you can produce miracles if you are diligent enough and you cast hard enough, frequently enough. The
Well, I will
miracle may not
definitely
be from
co-sign
one
that
spell.
one.
Right, but the miracle may not be from one spell. But
Yeah.
if that miracle is from 40 spells, is it any less a miracle? No.
Yeah. Maybe it's even more a miracle, because you put more of yourself and more effort into it and you proved it could be done.
It could be. No, that's what I mean when I say it doesn't fucking matter as long as you win.
Yep.
As long
Yeah.
as you win, it doesn't matter how many steps you took to get there. If someone takes fewer steps than you, cool. If you take more steps than them, cool. Did you get there? Did you cross the finish line? Do you have your cash and prizes at the end
Yeah.
of it? If so, awesome. You won. Good for you. I love that for you. I celebrate that for you.
And that the journey with more steps will often teach you more along the way. And then again, it's
That it
about who
will.
you've become through that.
Well, yeah, because failure is the thing that teaches us the most. Like pain educates, right? Like ideally you want to learn from other people's mistakes, but you never learn as sharply as from your own.
Yeah. Or success too, because sometimes, and you've taught me this, that, oftentimes you can ask your spirits who are invested in your success to teach you the magic that you need to do to get there. With
Right.
your spirit diplomacy course that I took recently, as I've said, my divinations have gotten so clear that I was just casting yesterday, and it's like, do I need to add anything else to this spell? Yes, you do. Okay, what is it? Okay, all right, I'm adding this, I'm doing this,
Yeah.
I'm covering this angle, I'm covering that angle. So yeah, there's that, and this is prevalent in the new agey communities too. There's belief that ease or quickness, or, oh, I just manifested it, I just did this thing. It's like, well, but are you afraid to put in the work? Because if you're afraid to put in the work, then I'm afraid maybe you're actually not creating anything that was all that difficult for you. Maybe you had a trust fund.
No, maybe you had a fucking trust fund. Maybe you did. The best wealth talisman in the world is a trust fund.
Yeah.
But but like, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot to be said about the nuts and bolts about all this and the why. But I think that if a person engages in magic to make their lives great with everything that we've discussed, I think they have more than a fighting chance of it being successful, getting the things that you want. And again, it takes time. It's your part-time job now, is
Yeah,
this campaign, but like, you can have a passion project. It will pay off in dividends. You plant those seeds, you can reap the fucking harvest.
it sure will. And it's fun.
It is fun. It is in fact the coolest shit ever.
It is. Well, on that note, I feel like we should probably start to wrap up, because we've been, gosh, you guys, for anyone who's watching this, like me and Alex do this on the phone like several times a week, as we will start in on a topic about magic and we will talk for hours and hours and hours. And I hope this conversation has been enlightening and educating. And I really just hope, I think that Alex and I really both just share the wish that more folks give themselves a chance with magic. And when you're seeing that there's a lot in occultism these days where people are saying, that didn't work, or I don't believe in this, or this person's a grifter, this person is this or that, or whatever. Yes, absolutely use discernment, because as with anything, of course, there are going to be methodologies that are not right for you. There are going to be teachers that are not right for you. There are going to be people who are just straight up grifters, who are charging crazy, insane prices for, something that they, packaged together with a business coach and didn't actually invest in learning in or whatever. So of course, but as I always say with repatterning, where we focus our energy is going to be where our results are created. So find the things that you do like, practice the things that you do like, have that beginner's mindset, like Alex is saying, and and cast and divine, and see where you're going, and you're going to end up so much farther ahead with so much more magical success and results to boast of for yourselves than those folks who are finding reasons why things don't work, and almost like looking for schadenfreude as a way of feeling like, I don't know, like superior, or I don't know, maybe if someone's magic doesn't work, they feel better if they think nobody else's does either. But like, surround yourself with people who are strategizing for success and are talking to you realistically, who are not just like selling you a crazy 10K pipe dream for their program or whatever, but who are who are in the trenches, who are doing the work, and who are coming out with results that you can see. And surround yourselves with those people, and make this a practice that transforms you, and don't give up, and keep working at it and doing your best, and you will absolutely transform your life. I think that's something that we'd both like to leave people with.
Oh yeah, 100%. That is the goal. Don't let the myth of the curmudgeon expert get in the way either. Like, I find this a lot, especially in the Western world in magic. It's like, oh well, if you're good at magic, then you must be like an old crusty person who hates everyone. And I haven't seen that. I mean, yeah, I've known some people who were that way, but some of my best teachers loved their life. They loved that people did magic. They didn't look at you as lesser than if you weren't as advanced as them. That's why they would teach me, because I certainly wasn't as advanced as them. But they didn't have this like everyone's dumb but me vibe. And I think that really takes a lot of the wind out of people's sails for no reason. So don't listen to them. I mean, again, if they have something to learn from them. But just, shrug your shoulders and shake your head at the curmudgeon who's telling you that like those kids these days can't be doing the magic because again, they were stacks of Llewellyn books deep getting nothing done when they were those kids' age themselves.
Yeah, that's something that Grant has always really, that I'm really, really grateful for, that Grant Morrison, my teacher with whom I'm in an apprenticeship, has always encouraged me, is whatever you're looking at, find the utility if you can, find the thing in it that is good, find the thing in it that is useful to you. Even if what's useful is realizing that you don't want to use any of it. Okay, well, I learned that I don't want to
Right,
do that or whatever, but
right.
always be looking for, and Grant's been great about like, hey, maybe you'll discover something different than me. Maybe something will work for you in a way that it doesn't work for someone else or whatever. Always be looking for that. Always be looking for the utility in things, the way that things will work for you, and always be looking for more, more and more signs of your own success. And if you lean into those, then they will expand and they will increase.
Agreed.
Well, thank you again for having this awesome conversation with me, and I hope folks learned a little bit about what it looks like to do more long-term strategic magic. And of course, if you want to find Alex, you can find his courses at practicaloccult.com. I highly recommend the 3-part spirit diplomacy course. That for me, especially if you're someone who already has a good beginner basis, that course I really think can take your magic to the next level. I know it certainly did for mine in the last few months. And me, you can find me at therepatterningproject.com. Our next session is January 21st, so that is just like, that is that's 10 days away. So go check it out. It's a really great way of creating a foundational basis of understanding your own beliefs and your own patterns, so that you can create a foundation within yourself and your your internal alignment that is going to help you to reach success. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks Alex for chatting. And yeah, we'll see you next time on the channel.